Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Several people sent me today's story, Mike in particular. Thank you very much. And you know that one of my pet peeves is robocalls. My cell phone and my desk phone in my office are ringing off the hook all day long. And I know some people don't have it as bad as others, but I sometimes will get 20 or 30 on my desk phone and 5 or 10 on my cell phone in one day. Now, people say, Steve, just don't answer. Well, you don't answer, you have to look, And I know it sounds like, not much, but the problem is a big one. And I've said for years that if they wanted to, they could stop them. But the phone companies are making money, and the people in Washington are making money. And so I was predicting this would never end. Well, it turns out that the robocalling companies have finally gone too far and have finally ticked off too many people with their auto dialers. And it looks like they've now finally gotten together and passed a law that might end this. Now, there's going to be exceptions and all that stuff, but the story from Market Watch sums it up pretty well. Robocall bill looks on track to become law, but lacks the bite of the earlier House measure. Yeah, they passed a really good law, and then it got watered down as they passed it through the system. By the time it popped out the other end, not quite so good. Now, it's the Traced Act, T-R-A-C-E-D, the Traced Act. It gets just moderate praise from a consumer advocate as it leaves much to the FCC. And as we know, the FCC is a toothless entity in Washington that does nothing except act as a lapdog for the communications industry. Victor Reclatus wrote an article, like I said, for Market Watch, and he says Washington is on track to deliver a law regarding robocalls, but it's unclear how much it's actually going to do. So it's drawing measured praise from one consumer advocate, while representatives of companies involved in robocalls are sounding somewhat relieved. This bill is clearly a step forward, said Margot Saunders, a senior attorney at the nonprofit National Consumer Law Center. It does impose some protections and mandates for consumers that will stop the robocall problem to some extent. The measure leaves much to the FCC as that regulatory agency keeps working to fix the problem of robocalls. And as we know, they've done zero to date, or almost zero. The Traced Act would require phone service providers to implement an effective caller ID authentication program that would get around the spoofing issues where I've pointed out before. I get phone calls on my desk phone, my office phone, and it'll actually show that William Beaumont Hospital is calling me. Beaumont Hospital is a huge, huge hospital in southeastern Michigan, and they are where I've gone for injuries, and friends of mine have gone for injuries, and I've known people who've gone there for operations. And when I see a William Beaumont Hospital calling me, I think my first response is it might be an important phone call. I pick it up. It's like, hi, your warranty has expired on your truck. Would you like a lower credit card interest rate? It's a voice. It's a tape. It's a recording. It's not William Beaumont Hospital. I've gotten phone calls spoofed from the city of Royal Oak. Now, I currently don't have an office in Royal Oak, but I used to. But when I see that the city of Royal Oak is calling me, answer it, hey, this is Rachel from Card Services. Do you want a lower credit card interest rate? So it would also make sure that providers are allowed to block unauthenticated calls. And if they would do that right there, that would solve so much of the problem. Such provisions mirror what the FCC is already working toward, allegedly, that's my word. In addition, the bill ramps up penalties for offenders and specifies that providers in rural areas must deliver the authentication program, and it bars providers from separately billing for authentication or blocking services. And, we all know that when they say they're going to find these people, they can't because these people are in other countries. Most of them are. Only idiots would form a corporation to do robocalls within the United States. You form the corporation offshore, bombard people in America with the robocalls, and just laugh when they find you, just yank the plug in that company, start another one. That's what they do. The NCLC noted in their statement that the measure does not mandate that call blocking programs be offered to all consumers, and it also does not provide clarification for the key disputed terms in the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, TCPA, which has been in the books for years but is unenforceable because you cannot figure out who these phone calls are coming from because of the spoofing technology which the phone companies let these people use. Now, this is a compromise measure that comes after the House earlier this year passed the Stopping Bad Robocalls Act, sponsored by Democratic Rep. Frank Pallone of New Jersey. But his acronym was not that good. It's an initialism. SBRA, which is not as cool as the Traced Act, the Telephone Robocall Abuse Criminal Enforcement and Deterrence Act, which was introduced by Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota and Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. The NCLC's Saunders said in May that Pallone's original bill aimed to go the farthest in cracking down on robocalls, while the Traced Act was getting the most traction because it does something that is clearly needed but is also already happening. ACA International, which lobbies for collection agencies, said in a statement last week on the Pallone-Thune Traced Act that it appreciated that Congress ultimately considered how the accounts receivable management industry and other legitimate actors would have been impacted by certain broad language in the original House bill that hindered needed business communications and made American businesses prone to additional frivolous litigation. Yeah, we're worried about frivolous litigation when we're being bombarded with frivolous phone calls. In a similar vein, defense attorney Eric Troutman, who specializes in Telephone Consumer Protection Act litigation and compliance, suggested in a blog post last week that clients could be thankful that the compromise measure does not appear to include new criminal enforcement provisions and doesn't contain several elements that were in the initial bill. The House Wednesday voted overwhelmingly in favor of the Pallone-Thune Traced Act, and the Senate was reportedly expected to vote on it earlier this week or next week. The bill's supporters said in a statement last month that they believe it can be signed into law by the president. The Congress people wrote a statement that said, "It's time to put Americans back in charge of their phones. Our agreement will require telephone carriers to verify calls and allow robocalls to be blocked in a consistent and transparent way, all at no extra charge to consumers. The agreement also gives the FCC and law enforcement the ability to quickly go after scammers." Americans received a record-setting 5.7 billion robocalls in October. 1 month. 5.7 billion robocalls. Okay? Do the math. There's like 300 some odd million Americans. And so if each of them got 3 phone calls, I could do the math, but that sounds like a billion. So 5.7 billion robocalls in October. According to estimates from Umail, a company that provides a call blocking service, the new monthly all-time high reminds us there's a long way to go before the robocall problem is solved, that company said in a news release. And dozens of organizations have lobbied lawmakers this year on anti-robocall bills, according to trade groups, including Credit Union National Association to public companies such as debt collector Encore Capital Group, both of which have claimed an interest in this. And, here's the thing. There are companies out there that have auto dialers. They're just dialing numbers. Boom, 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 boom. And I don't understand why there's not some place in the system that recognizes that there's one phone call, one entity making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone calls roughly at the same time. Those cannot be legitimate phone calls. And it's kind of the same way that, email providers should recognize that one email address is sending out, one message to 3 million recipients. And now I understand there might be legitimate organizations that send out like a newsletter via email that has 1 million members on its newsletter list. But that's the exception. Bulk of these emails that I get have been just CC'd to 900,000 other people. And somebody should look at that and go, that's probably spam. Just kill it. Just kill it. And the same is true with the phones. The phone company must recognize who the people are who are abusing this. They should shut them off. And I've had people in the industry say, "Steve, you are right. They just don't want to do it because they're making money." And I have other people go, "Steve, you're naive. They can't stop that. They can't stop that." As if the phone system is something you can just tap into and just use willy-nilly without anybody knowing you're doing it, and you just get to do it for free. Why don't I get a phone system that works like that? Why is that, So there is something that can be done about it. I'm always skeptical until I see the final bill that gets signed into law and see how it actually works. And that often takes a little while to figure out and to see the results. So I'm not going to say that this is the answer yet. I'm not going to say that because I don't know. I will watch to see what happens with this. But I suspect there's still going to be a time period, even after this law goes into effect, where we're getting bombarded with robocalls. It's going to happen. There's too much money at stake right now. These companies are making money, and the lobbyists are making money, and the politicians are making money. And so that's one of the reasons the FCC has had power to step in and do this. They just haven't done it. Now, the legislature is being pushed by people who are complaining after hearing people like me rant about it And I complain, and I hope you complain whenever you have the opportunity to do so, and let the politicians know they need to do something about this. But, it takes forever for things to happen in Washington, unfortunately. But the robocalls bill looks on track to become law, but of course, they've got to pass the identical thing in both houses and then send it up for signature. It has to get signed into law, and of course, there's always a long period before they get enacted and that kind of thing. We'll see. I'm skeptical. But I'm slightly optimistic. I mean, it's better than nothing, right? I hope. There you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Houston, we have a problem.